Well, Swansea City first ruined QPR's Christmas and now they've spoiled Easter. The Welsh side's 2-1 win at Loftus Road on Monday afternoon, their fifth in a row under caretaker manager Alan Sheehan, as he pushes for the job on a permanent basis. Having already confirmed championship safety on Friday afternoon, a lax Rangers side were completely unable to match Swansea's intensity for the first 65 minutes and didn't register a single shot on target until Karamoko Dembele's 72nd minute consolation goal. I'm Connor, aka Hoopsa. I make QPR match previews, reactions, interviews and features, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down this latest R's performance. If you like what you see or hear, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, follow or leave a rating depending on where you're tuning in, and let's get into it. Martí Cifuentes had initially intended to make two changes to Friday's winning side, with match winner Lucas Anderson and Ryan Colley replacing Dembele and the injured Koki Saito, but the manager was forced to make a third just before kick-off, with Jonathan Varane pulling out during the warm-up due to injury, meaning Morgan Fox took his place and Ronnie Edwards was pushed into the midfield. The trouble is, none of these three changes worked out, chief of them all the one that Cifuentes hadn't wanted to make in the first place. The opening 10 minutes of the match were cagey, but before long Swansea's high press and intensity started to cause Rangers problems. Alan Sheehan's side were just as well organised as Liam Manning's Bristol City last weekend, and their intensity in closing down any Rangers player that managed to get themselves on the ball forced us into mistakes, snuffed out any attempts to start an attack at the source, and gave the backline little option but to end up pumping long balls up to Colley. He's actually been occasionally pretty good at winning balls in the air, but he had a torrid time here against centre-backs Ben Kambango and Harry Darling, and understandably struggled to make things stick. With that said, he wasn't aided at all by a strangely imbalanced midfield. Without the injured Saito and suspended Paul Smith, our wingers of choice for this match were Madsen on the left, a player who has recently started to thrive in a central attacking role, and Yang on the right, an attacker who has actually looked more impactful over the past couple of games as a false nine. Anderson was one of the more puzzling choices for me though. That goal on Friday was a screamer, and its importance cannot be understated, especially given I'd have hated for us to have needed something from this game, given how much better Swansea were in pretty much every department, but there are so many reasons that rewarding him with a start here was not a logical decision. The biggest is that, like 6 others in this starting 11, he's out of contract in the summer, and given his limited minutes in the team this season, I'd be surprised if we're looking to extend his stay. Given there are at least 4 other players on the bench who could play in that position, all of which I expect to be here after the summer, and all of which could have sell-on value for Rangers in the future, that just doesn't check out for me. Then there's the fact that he has shown time and time again that he just doesn't have the level of energy or intensity to regularly start games at this level anymore. He was chasing shadows, he didn't know where to position himself, and along with Yang, that made us as weak off the ball down the right as we were down our left with it. And for any Madsen naysayers, you can also throw in the fact that Rangers haven't won a single match this season in which both Danes have started. The final midfield issue was that Ronnie Edwards was in there, and that's not that he was playing badly, he was easily the early standout for Rangers with a number of important blocks at 0-0, but the fact he was doing it in the middle of the pitch meant that he wasn't doing it in our box with Morrison, a partnership which had been unbeaten since its formation 4 matches prior. That impacted not only the quality of our defending but also our ability to build up play. Morrison now relied on as the sole ball player, and Swansea before long putting an end to that. Again, while I appreciate this was an unplanned change, when there were multiple other genuine midfielders that could have stepped into that role, I would have thought the priority would have been preserving Morrison and Edwards at centre-back. So eventually, on 29 minutes, these problems compounded led to the away side inevitably taking the lead. Admittedly, they had done little of attacking note until the goal themselves until this point, but the gap in intensity, quality and attitude was vast, and when fullback Josh Timman was allowed to charge upfield with the ball from his own half, completely unbothered and crossed into the box, only for Fox to put it in his own net, they were able to go 1-up without registering a single shot on target in the first half. The scoreboard immediately showed 3-0 Swansea, then 4 before tumbling down to 1, and you could only hope at that stage it wasn't a prophecy. As half-time approached, all 3 of Frey, Powell and Chair were warming up, and there was a very good case for the whole trio to come on at the break. But instead, we decided to give it 8 minutes of the second half just to check we still looked as despondent as the first, which we did, before the inevitable first 2 changes came, with Powell and Frey replacing Ashby and Anderson. And even that was too late, because within 2 minutes, Swansea doubled their lead. It was the kind of goal you could see happening in front of you 20 seconds before it actually happened. Franco weaving a passage of passing on the right out to on the left, the Korean turning Dunn inside out and Darling scrambling in Cullen's flick inside the 6-yard box. And the prophesied third nearly followed 3 minutes later when floated in a dangerous cross to the back post, but Nardi spared our blushes with a close range save of Cullen's shot. Now, I generally try to avoid talking about referees, mostly because most of them are poor at best at this level, and most of the time when we lose a match, it's down to our own shortcomings. Don't get me wrong, that remains the case here, and Swansea were more than deserving of their win based on the football they played alone. But I can't go any longer in this reaction without talking about Tom Neild. This was, simply put, one of the most abject refereeing performances I've ever seen. And with the EFL website telling me that the majority of his 34 games last season came in League One and 3 in the Japanese second division, he and his linesmen were so blatantly out of their depth. I've never found myself disagreeing with so many decisions, and Swansea were allowed to get away with murder, with players going down faking injuries, trainers constantly being called onto the pitch, our players being shoved and the ball being kicked away, all of which they really needn't have bothered with because they were blatantly the better football team. Our next double sub on 67 minutes, Colley off for Dembele and Yang off for 18-year-old Emerson Sutton for his thoroughly deserved senior debut, at least injected some much needed pace and width into the side. And with Maddison finally now back in the middle where he belongs, we clawed 1 goal back within 5 minutes of their introduction. It was a really simple goal on paper, Maddison playing a perfectly weighted through ball in behind for Dembele to run onto and blast into the back of the net off the right post. But both of those are things that so many of our other players can't do and haven't done this season. The pair, despite their criticisms, both now have 3 goal involvements each over the past 4 matches, and even though he's just 19th in the squad for minutes played, Dembele is now joint third with Jimmy Dunn for goals and assists with 7. Chair was our 5th and final sub for Maddison 2 minutes later, a welcome return having gone off injured at Borough in early March, but I had a hunch that we couldn't just turn up and play at 70 minutes and come out with a share of these points, and that's exactly what happened. Between the constant stoppages of faux injuries and a whistle-happy ref, Rangers just didn't find the rhythm they would need for an equaliser. We were too hesitant in building up play, and we just couldn't get Sutton, who was often in plenty of open space, on the ball enough to really see what he was about. I've also got to say, in a match in which we'd had real difficulty in creating from open play, we were far too wasteful with the handful of corners that we won, and even with 8 minutes added on, the damage had already been done. Now look, it's the end of the season, it is what it is. This group had already looked on the beach in some matches before we were even mathematically safe, so it doesn't come as all too much of a surprise. But then you look at the way Swansea are ending this season, a team that can't make the playoffs without winning their remaining 2 matches, everyone from 10th to 6th bottling it, while simultaneously overturning a 9-goal difference between themselves and Coventry. And it shows you it doesn't always have to be like this. You could argue that it doesn't matter how you end the season. QPR won their last 3 matches of last season to cap off a drastic U-turn, form that many had hoped would lead Rangers to at least a top half finish this season, only for us to win just once in our first 16 games in this campaign. It just doesn't work like that. For me though, the main source of all of my criticisms from this match comes back to the team selection and why we aren't prioritising players that we know have a good chance of being here next season. They're the future of this team, so let's get as much of a head start as possible and prepare them for next season. I appreciate with the number of contracts expiring that you can't drop all outbound players to the bench, but I'd much rather see players with something to prove and their QPR careers ahead of them than what we sat through for that first 65 minutes. If anything, it does at least hopefully show the club that we can't afford to be sentimental. There are players here, despite their contributions, that it's time to say thank you and move on in the summer. And hopefully this has given Cifuentes and Nori a clearer idea of who those should be if they don't know already. So, 2 matches to go, 2 that should be considerably harder, and 2 that we aren't likely to win on paper. So let's try and use these productively. Anyway, that's all from me. As usual, please let me know what you thought about this match in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel and you've enjoyed this match reaction, please consider hitting like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for my Burnley match preview. Cheers.